why don't we go ahead and get started? So you were born on what, July 24th, 1938?
1938. And I was born at the hospital, St. Mary's Hospital in Columbus, Nebraska, which was the last hospital between there and Salt Lake, Utah. If you got in trouble between Schuyler, Nebraska, or Columbus, Nebraska, and Salt Lake, Utah, you were in real trouble. And then they finally built some more hospitals. But
how far was that from the farm?
About 15 miles. And then when we first, when Grandpa and Grandma first moved to the farm, they weren't registered as living in Schuyler, Nebraska. They were registered as living in Richland, Nebraska. And I don't know why, but then they changed it to Schuyler, the address to Schuyler.
Okay. So what else? So tell me everything you remember about the day you were born. What was going on?
I just remember that Aunt Rose said, Grandma called her about 8 o'clock in the morning and said, I'm supposed to have all the harvesters here for lunch today, and I'm in labor, so I can't do it. You'll have to do it. So she came over to our house and ran the lunch instead of doing it at her house, and she used all Grandma's dishes and stuff. But anyway, she said she helped because Grandma went to the hospital, and I was born about 6 o'clock, I think, in the evening.
Okay. And Aunt Rose was who?
Uncle Leonard's wife, my dad's brother's wife.
So Grandpa's sister-in-law.
You remember Uncle Leonard? He was the one that tried to kiss Libby.
Oh yeah, we all remember Uncle Leonard. So
he said,
what's up?
He said once upon a time, he said, I'm the one that started calling you Birdie.
Yeah. I just remember he tried to make out with Libby with his oxygen tank. So
yeah.
Yeah, it was really hot. It was hard for me to resist.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Oh, he was the last of that family, right? Didn't he die, 10 years ago, something like that?
No. Let's see. Yeah, he was the last one to die. I'm trying to think though if he was. I guess he was the baby of the family.
Okay. So you told me that the day you were born was the day that the farm was electrified.
That's right. That they did not have electricity before then, and then Grandpa really got on it. Your grandfather. He decided that it was necessary for farmers to have electricity. So all we had for electricity, though, in the house and on the farm, were light bulbs hanging down from the ceiling. And I remember sort of those first days because I was 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4, and we still had one light bulb hanging from the ceiling. And to have enough light, we burned kerosene lamps as well.
So you had lights in the house and in the barn?
No, we didn't have any light in the barn yet.
Just lights in the house.
And the farmers had to string their own wires for electricity, which was very dangerous because they knew nothing about electricity.
Yeah.
And that got started, and Schuyler and Columbus and the surrounding towns got started in Nebraska. And then Grandpa got on the board and they started electrifying the whole state of Nebraska. He's very responsible for the whole state of Nebraska getting electrified. And then he became the national chairman. So he had a lot to do with the national production of electricity for farmers. And he met President Truman and President Roosevelt. Roosevelt started the whole thing. And then I don't know, when Dad went to the Army, we stayed with Grandpa and Grandma in Schuyler on the farm. And we had a terrible snowstorm. It was like April, and it was very unusual for Nebraska, but we had a terrible snowstorm, knocked down all the wires. And the farmers had to restring them again by themselves. They didn't have any help. It's different now, but it just recently changed that they didn't have to do all the work.
Yeah, and what you're talking about, your father, my grandpa, that's the REA, right? The Rural Electric Association?
Yeah, Rural Electric Association, huh?
And that was one of Roosevelt's.
And then they called it the NCREA because it was the National Cooperative Rural Electrification.
And the purpose of this was to bring electricity to farms, basically.
Right, and not just to the farmhouses, but to the barns and anywhere else that they needed electricity. You know, like people who run dairy farms, it was just unbelievable after they got electricity because they could put them on electric machines and milk them faster and milk more of them and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And so Grandpa met Roosevelt and Truman.
Yep.
At the White House.
Yep. And I'm trying to look for a picture, but I haven't found one yet. They must have had a picture someplace, but I don't know. I haven't seen one. He has a lot of pictures like the one you found on the front of a magazine from one of his trips that he went on. But that's all that I've found so far.
So did he have a preference for Roosevelt or Truman, or does he remember much? Did he remember much about either one?
No, he was a Democrat full-fledged after that. After Truman started, I mean, after Roosevelt started the REA, he was very strongly. He knew all the senators and all the congressmen from Nebraska very well. Yeah. He got Martin out of the service. He was in China, and Martin. He got him out 6 months early because he called Roman Hruska, who was a good old bohunk, Democratic bohunk. Yeah. His name is spelled Hruska, but it's pronounced Hruska. Yeah. And anyway, he called him and said, "Get my son back home. I need him. We don't have any hired help, and it's hard to farm."
And this was during the war, like the Second World War?
During the Second World War. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. And Martin had been shipped to China. Yeah. So he came home and he was very embarrassed because he was a Marine and he didn't think he should be coming home yet, but oh well.
A little embarrassed he didn't see any action?
Not very much. He told Jim McVeigh, your brother-in-law, that he marched with Chiang Kai-shek, but I don't know if that's true. Yeah. I never heard him say that. And the last time I talked to him, I recorded his story with Ron Shanka's story. Ron was in the Korean War, and he was a Top Gun.
He was a pilot?
And Martin, yep. And Martin was just a Marine on the road. Yeah. But he never told that story that time either, so I don't know if it's true or not, but I don't know. He told Jim that, so I believe it.
Could be, yeah.
And then he also said, Ronnie was a Top Gun, and I went to his funeral when he passed away. He was such a sweetheart. And anyway, I went to his funeral, and one of the guys that flew with him said, Ronnie was quite the pilot. He really wanted to defend the guys on the ground, so he flew very low. He almost always came home with green leaves from the trees on his wings of his airplane. So he's a really good pilot.
When did he fly?
When?
Yeah.
Oh, probably I'm trying to think when the Korean War was. 50-ish.
1950 to 53. So he flew in the Korean War?
Yep.
Yeah. So what was life on the farm like? Kind of like, because I don't really remember the farm. I'm too young for that. That was kind of gone by the time I came along. Like, was there a house and a barn or what? What are we talking about here?
The house, I think, was built by Emil Sofo, although originally the house and the farm belonged to a woman, I think. I looked it up for previous owners, and Emil Sofo bought it from a woman, I believe. I'll have to look that up again. But if it wasn't our farm, it was a farm next door, which was also a Shanka farm. And the Shankas all became farmers, but then two of them left, and one of them was Marilyn Shanka, who you know. That was her father that left, and Ronnie's father, Ronnie Shanka, the Top Gun. Yeah. And Ronnie's father went to Burwell, Nebraska, which is pretty far west, and it was pretty not farmable land. It was not good farmland. So he became a real estate agent for farmers and ranchers and became very wealthy because of that. And then his son took over, Ronnie took over, and he was selling land all over the United States, ranch land. He was selling some in Mississippi one time, and I don't know. Anyway, they both became very good real estate agents and became very famous. And Uncle Eldon, who was Marilyn's father, was kind of a Rounder. He ran a feed mill, I believe, in the end. He did a farm for a while, but then he ran a feed mill. And then he died young, and probably from drinking. I'm not sure. Maybe that should not be revealed in a book.
Well,
But
I'm not planning on that, so.
yeah.
Uh,
But anyway, and he married a nice lady from Clarkson, Nebraska, and they had 3 kids: Bernard, who was Katie and Martin's age, and Marilyn, who was my age, and then a younger sister of Marilyn's, who was younger than us. She was probably 3 or 4 years younger than me. And she told me one day that she had named one of her children after me, which I was very flattered by. But anyway, what the original part of the story was that we all together, the Shanka brothers, ran about 1,000 acres of land, and I never realized how that impressed people until I had graduated from high school, and I went back home for a weekend and ran into this friend of mine, and he said he was a farmer and he was trying to be an organic farmer and all that kind of stuff. And he said, boy, those Shankas, they had a lot of land. Is it still in the Shanka name? And I said, no, not all of them. And he said, oh, that's so sad. They were such a good bunch of farmers. And so anyway, that was kind of important to know that they were that important.
Neat. So what was the farm like? Like, you had a house? And
We had a nice, very nice house. And I think Emil Solfel was partly responsible for that. He became a lumberman after he quit farming.
Yeah.
And we had a
There's
big
a house
big
and
house.
a barn, or what?
We had a house with 4 bedrooms. There was no running water when I was born. And
Wow.
we didn't have any running water in the house until I was probably 8 or 9.
So what did you do for going to the bathroom or taking a bath?
We'd go to the outhouse. We had an outhouse.
Doesn't sound like a lot of fun.
We had a pump that we had to pump water and take it in the house. And your grandmother had a wood stove when I was very young, and we would burn cobs in it. And one
Is
time,
that the wood stove that was in the garage when we were kids?
I think it was.
Yeah.
They gave it to my grandma Jonas when they got electricity on the farm. But
Yeah.
she would, heat up the oven and cook like crazy. And she was a very good cook. And I don't know how they ever figured out what the temperature of the oven was, but anyway, they did. And then
what was it like to take a bath? Like, did you have to
you had to heat up the water and put it in a tub. And Katie and Martin remember that they took a bath after Daddy, when he was out farming and he was all dirty. He took the first bath. And then they had to take the bath after him, and in a tub. It wasn't in the bathroom. It wasn't that kind of fancy tub. It was just a big wash tub. And they got in there and took the bath after Grandpa was all dirty. And then I don't know when mom got a bath, but anyway, it was pretty dirty by the time she got in there, I'm sure. Anyway, we pumped water and heated it on the stove, and there was no way to keep it warm. You just hurried up and got out of there, and so the next person could get a warm bath. And then we finally got a tub, but we still didn't have running water. And I think at first we had only cold running water, so you had to still heat water up and put it in the tub.
So you had to
and then
go out.
finally got running water. But we would pump buckets of water for baths and put it on the stove, get it warm.
That sounds pretty hard. I mean, you have to go out. And what about going to the bathroom in the winter and all that? You still had to go out to the outhouse?
Yep.
Yeah, so you had to like put your boots on.
That was no fun at all.
Yeah.
And we used Sears Roebuck catalogs for toilet paper. And the house was a great house. Had a huge kitchen, which was necessary for the farmers, and it had a bathroom. I don't know if they built the bathroom on or not. I don't think they did. And then attached to the bathroom was another room that we used for separating milk in. And Grandpa's dirty pants at the end of the day. And then we had outside of the house, there was a wash house where they would wash clothes and can food in the summertime because it was too hot to do in the house. And we didn't have air conditioning. We had fans, but no air conditioning. So we did that. And then there was a huge barn that has been destroyed. I haven't been back there in years, but it was destroyed a long time ago. And it was a huge barn. I don't know why they destroyed it. And we had a hen house that was quite large. It was like 2 stories. And the hens had their nests in these little big nest houses. There'd be 4 nest houses in a row, and then 3 layers of nest houses. And we'd go out there to pick eggs, and the chickens would bite our hands, and it was always terrific trying to pick eggs.
But you had
And Grandma raised chickens, and she butchered them and sold them to people in town. And she was a very good butcher. You got a clean hen when you got it from Grandma. It pulled out all the pin feathers and everything, and she had a lot of business because she was a good butcher. And she also sold cream. We didn't have Holstein cows like they have here in Wisconsin. We had Guernsey cows, and they give much bitter cream. It was so rich. It was like creme fraiche in a day. It was so good, so thick, and so sweet.
How would she make the cream?
Well, you separate it from the milk. That was a separator. There was a separator. I don't know if you remember it, but there was a separator on the back porch, great big steel drum that you poured the milk into, and then it went through these discs. There must have been like 150 discs, and cream went one direction and milk went the other direction.
Oh, wow. So she would, and then she would just bottle up in glass bottles and take it into town.
She'd take the cream into quart jars. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Neat. And she would just kind of sell it where, like in downtown Schuyler?
The people would call her and ask her.
Oh, yeah.
And she'd sell a quart for $1.
That sounds like a lot, actually. Like,
no, it's not. Not
no?
compared
Okay.
to these days. Now you get a cup for $2.50, I think.
Well, there's inflation, but I'm just thinking, like, if a newspaper was a dime back then, $1 sounds like a lot but I'm sure it was good cream. So,
Oh, it was excellent.
yeah. And so, and the stove, that would have been a wood burning stove or what?
Yeah. Well, no, by that time, well, a little bit later, right after the electricity became so important and Grandpa got on the board, he met like the presidents of General Electric and all those people, and they gave Mom an electric stove.
Oh, wow. That had to be a big deal at that time.
Yeah. Oh, it was excellent. It was wonderful.
Cool.
And yeah, and one of the bigwigs from General Electric stopped by the farm one day, and Grandpa's in his bib overalls, and Mom had just finished picking eggs, and so she's all dirty, and she saw this guy coming up to the house, and she ran and hid in the living room. And Grandpa came in with this guy, and he kept saying, Clara, where are you? And I was about 5, and I ran into the living room and said, here she is, Daddy, right here. And she could have killed me because she was all dirty and messed up. Yeah. Anyway, she said, they're just making fun of us. I don't know why you do this, but oh well.
Well, you had to, a woman back then always had to look her best when there was company, right? I mean,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, she would have pretty much always worn a dress, right? I mean, women.
Oh, yeah. When we went to town, she dressed up. She and Grandpa both dressed up. Yeah. Grandpa would, if we were going to church, he'd always wear a suit, and Mom would always wear nice clothes and nylons and all the whole thing. Yeah. If we went in and we're just shopping, Mom would still dress up, but Daddy wouldn't wear a suit. He might wear dress pants and a nice shirt, but he wouldn't wear a whole suit. So when you went, they were always kind of country gentlemen.
Yeah. So basically, anytime you went to town, everybody would get dressed up.
Yep.
Even if it was just to go to the movies or something.
Right. Yep. Especially if you went to the movies. If you went grocery shopping, maybe not quite as much, but you didn't wear bib overalls in those days.
No. Just so basically jeans and bib overalls were purely practical. That's just what you wore when you were in the fields or something.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and if you're on the farm, you might wear them all day long, but not if you had company coming or something.
Yeah. Neat.
Yeah. And it had, we had 4 bedrooms upstairs. The bathroom was downstairs, and the telephone was downstairs, and it was a ringer type telephone. It was a big box, wood box with a little handle on the side, and you'd wind that around to get the operator, and it would tinkle. So everybody it was always a party line. There were at least 5 people on the line, all farmers. And if you round that handle up to get the operator, it rang in everybody's house. So everybody would pick up the receiver and listen to the conversation.
Yeah, so a party line meant there were multiple people on that same line.
Yeah.
And if they wanted to, they could listen in on other conversations, just like you could listen. Yeah. And like you
So-
had, every house had a distinctive ring, right? Like yours was
Right.
2 rings. And
Ours was 1 long and 2 short, I think. And I think the phone number was 501, but I'm not sure.
just 3 numbers.
Yeah, I
Wow.
think. I'm not sure now. That could have been our license plate number. But
But
I'm not
so that was the phone you used when you were a girl.
hmm
This is in all through your high school years or what?
Oh yeah, but I lived in town with Grandma Jonas, and she had a party line on her phone too,
Yeah.
but it wasn't as you couldn't notify other people that you're making a phone call. You just picked up the receiver and called the operator.
You would call the operator, and even if you knew the number, the operator would have to dial it for you.
Yep.
Like, could you say, I want to talk to Carl Jonas, and if she knew who that was, she could punch it in herself, or did you pretty much have to know the number?
You'd have to have the numbers. You should have the number, but they would find it for you and plug it
Yeah.
in.
I mean, I'm thinking Schuyler is a small town. I just have this like stereotype that the operator would have kind of known everybody, or no, not really.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And
The operator's a pretty powerful
when you-
person, really, because she
when
kind
your
of
dad
knows.
and I were first married, we had a party line on our phone,
Yeah,
but you didn't hear anybody picking up the receiver or anything.
but still, people could on the line could.
They could.
So if when you were in high school, were you kind of careful when you called boys and stuff like that, or were
No,
you?
I didn't call boys. You didn't do that in those days.
Well, if
I
boys
did.
called you, I mean,
I did it in nurses training. I called your father a couple times, but
yeah.
oh well. But yeah, the telephone was in the kitchen. So if you got an emergency type phone call, you're scared to death because it rang in the middle of the night. You knew it was an emergency because nobody would call you in the middle of the night,
Sure.
except some, but you'd have to run all the way downstairs. And I think I told you the story of your Aunt Katie.
I'm not sure. I've told me lots of stories about her. So what's this one?
So she loved to do things. So she was married and they came home for Christmas. They were living in Georgia by this time, and Uncle Smoke was a civilian flight instructor for the Army. So anyway, they came home, they flew home, and they came home for Christmas, and they went to town to see all their friends, and Katie had a little too much to drink. So they came home, and I was babysitting with their kids, and they walked into the kitchen, and Katie said, "Let's call somebody." It was like 1:00 in the morning. And I said, "Oh, Katie, come on." She said, no, let's call somebody. So she got on the phone and rang up this farm number of the farmer. And she didn't know who it was, of course, but the woman had to run all the way downstairs to answer the phone, I'm sure. And I'm sure she was pretty upset when she heard Katie's voice. And she said, "Hi, Thelma." She didn't know these people from the Hill Beans. She said, "Hi, Thelma, how are you today?" Because her phone number was in the phone book and the names were in the phone book. Yeah. And so the woman said, "Well, I'm fine, but it's the middle of the night, for goodness sakes. What do you want?" And she said, "I would like to talk to your husband for just a few minutes." And she said, "Well, how do you know my husband?" And Katie said, "Well, we just know each other. So please get him on the phone." So he got on the phone and she said, "Hello, Frank. How are you?" And he said, "Who the hell is this?" He said, "Well, it's Katie." And she said, "I'm in town for just a few days and I'd love to see you. We're staying at the Sky Motel, so come and see me." He said, "I don't know you from a Hill of Beans and I'm not coming to see you." She said, "Oh, you'll be sorry if you don't come to see me." Anyway, this is what she did. So we had some fun that night, but.
Well, yeah, that was the good old days. You couldn't possibly trace a call or anything. So
Yeah.
So
it was pretty hard. But Aunt Rose was on the line too, and Aunt Rose was one of the biggest gossips in town. So she listened to all the conversations of
she was on
everybody.
your party line, you mean? The same
Yeah,
house. So you
And
had to be
Sally,
careful.
Sally Marduk would call me and she'd say, "Now, Aunt Rose, please hang up the phone because I have something very personal to tell Roberta." And of course, she wouldn't hang up the phone.
So if you were talking on the phone, you just kind of had to assume that Aunt Rose was listening.
Oh, yeah. For
Well,
sure.
at least the people on the party line were people you knew. So
yeah.
So what else is on the farm? So you had chickens. You were mostly what? He was mostly a wheat farmer.
Grandpa farmed wheat, and they would rotate crops to fertilize the land. They'd put alfalfa on the field one year, and then grow wheat the next couple of years, and then put alfalfa back on the farm again. So they got into rotating crops to save the land. And they're talking about the fact that land is not very good anymore. So I don't know. They'll have to grow a lot of alfalfa, I guess.
Yeah. So you had wheat and alfalfa and chickens. You had pigs, right?
We had corn. Uncle Martin did pigs. He was a
Okay.
big pig farmer.
There weren't pigs on your farm growing up?
We didn't really. Mom hated pigs, and they smelled terrible. So his pig shed was right close to the house on the east side, and the wind would come from the east, and it would just smell terrible. But oh well.
So there
And he
was
got pretty famous for being a pig farmer, but then that industry kind of became a co-op, and it kind of put him down. He didn't have enough land to farm, and he didn't have enough pigs, and so he got into the co-op, which did pretty well, but that kind of fizzled out too. So
Are we
he was
talking about
in
Grandpa
tough shape.
Shaka here? Or
No, I'm talking about Martin.
yeah, Uncle Martin. Uncle Martin was the pig farmer. I remember that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Grandpa had cows and cattle, and he had a pasture on the Platte River. And right off the pasture land and connected to his pasture was an island that the Foldas, who are also relatives, used to own. And when they died or whatever, Grandpa started to pay taxes on the land and started to buy it. And so this guy across the river was an attorney, and he knew what the land was worth, and he kept offering Grandpa money, and Grandpa finally got tired of fighting with him. And so he went to his attorney and said, what should I do? And he said, you're about ready to retire, just sell him the land. So he sold the land for about $10,000. And that was really cheap even then. And the guy made it into a resort. It's worth millions of dollars right now.
Wow. Is that resort
And
still around?
I would have liked to have claimed it when Grandpa passed away, because he gave Katie and I that pasture. And Grandpa insisted that they come and put up a dike along that from the pasture to the island, because that little stream that ran through the pasture as a result of the river, the Platte River, ran through the Grandpa's pasture, and every year it flooded, and it flooded even in Schuyler from that little tiny stream. So he convinced the city or the county, whatever, to put up a dike which connected that island then, because there wasn't water between the island and the pasture anymore. So the south side of the property, according to me, made the island my island, because there wasn't any water running through there anymore. And it said to the middle of the south side of the land line that he owned, the south side of the island was where the water was going, and there wasn't. So the property line said to the middle of the stream. So in my head, the island was again connected to the pasture, and I wanted to claim it, but this attorney discouraged me. So I didn't, and I should have.
Well, according to Zoom, we have to end this meeting. I only get an hour for free.
Okay.
But I'm going to try to upgrade. I'll have to come up with a better plan. We need to be able to talk longer than an hour, but
okay.
Guess I'll have to end the meeting. But I'll make a recording of it, and I'll upload it and text everybody so everyone can see this. But this was awesome, Mom. This was